We're going to take a look next at the remorse and the suicide of Judas. When Judas saw that Jesus was condemned, he repented himself, is what it says in Matthew chapter 27 and verse 3. He returned to the chief priests and he said, "I have sinned in that I have betrayed the innocent blood." The religious leaders were unmoved by Judas's confession and his casting of the silver pieces into the sanctuary. They collected the money and decided to purchase a plot of ground in which strangers could be buried, because it was unlawful to put blood money into the treasury. In remorse, however, Judas went out and he hanged himself. We then come to the Roman trial of Jesus Christ, the first time before Pilate. The Jews brought Jesus before Pilate, the legal Roman authority in Jerusalem. Pilate surprised the people by demanding that they should state their terms and ground of accusation against Jesus. Not wanting Pilate to reopen the case, they answered, "Had he not been an evildoer, we would not have handed him over to you." They foresaw that they might not obtain Pilate's sanction to their accusation of blasphemy. Therefore, they offered an accusation of treason on 3 counts. First, plotting sedition against Rome. Second, forbidding the paying of tribute to Caesar. And third, claiming to be the Messiah, a king. And as the charge of treason was one that Pilate could not dismiss lightly, he personally examined Jesus. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked him. Jesus knew Pilate was not hardened beyond appeal, and in reply he said, "Sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell you it of me?" "Then you are a king," Pilate continued to probe. Jesus explained that his kingdom was not secular, but spiritual, a kingdom not of outward force, territory, or law and order, but of inward conviction and sentiments, a kingdom of the heart, a kingdom of truth. And convinced that there would be no danger to return to the Roman government from such a person, Pilate returned to the people and he said, "I find no fault in him." At this point, Pilate, under Roman law, should have released Jesus. But instead, he listened to the priests who angrily proclaimed, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee, even into this place." Hearing Galilee mentioned, Pilate sent Jesus to Herod, the ruler of that province. Herod was visiting at Jerusalem. He had desired to see Jesus for a long time, but he did not wish to condemn him to death. Herod's experience with John the Baptist had taught him the penalty of such a death. Instead, he had some of his guards array Jesus in a bright-colored robe of mockery and sent him back to Pilate, possibly with a letter of flattery. And so we see Jesus the second time before Pilate. It was now near sunrise, and Pilate's ploy to rid himself of Jesus did not work. Once again, he was confronted with the destiny of a man who he knew was innocent. In seeking a way to release Jesus, he offered to release a prisoner, for such a gesture was customary at the Passover. Pilate offered to release either Jesus or Barabbas, the meanest man in prison who was awaiting execution. In one accord, the mass chose Barabbas. Pilate, possibly to garner sympathy for Jesus, decided to have him scourged, thus again revealing his weakness in a case that called for strength and firmness of decision. The soldiers took Jesus away and beat him with a cat of 9 tails, in which pieces of stone, bone, or metal were embedded in the ends. And such beatings often ended in death. They cast his purple robe over his lacerated body, rammed a plated crown of thorns on his head, and placed in his right hand a reed scepter. And they mocked him, and they struck him with rods on his thorn-covered brow. They slapped his face and his bleeding body. They spit in his face. Kneeling down to him, they exclaimed in mockery, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Pilate had a purpose in allowing this. He thought one look at the broken and bleeding form arrayed in a clownish garb as a mocking would convince the mob of the utter folly that such a person could usurp the Roman throne. Pointing to the battered form, Pilate said, "Behold the man." Angry cries of "Crucify him! Crucify him! Crucify him!" dashed Pilate's hopes of releasing Jesus. Renewing his efforts to free him, Pilate questioned Jesus further. Then again he proclaimed, "Behold your king." And they answered, "Away with him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," they replied. This was the first time that the Jews ever admitted this. The prophet had declared, "The scepter shall not depart until Shiloh come." This statement was additional proof that the Messiah had indeed appeared. Pilate finally gave up hope. He took a basin of water and he washed his hands, stating, "I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it." And in a tragic reply, the Jews cried out, "Let his blood be upon us and upon our children." Consequently, Pilate, wishing to appease the mob, released unto them Barabbas and delivered Jesus up to their will to be crucified. Judgment fell upon some of the main characters in the arrest, trial, and crucifixion of Jesus. Judas died a loathsome suicide. The house of Annas was destroyed some years later. Caiaphas was deposed a year after the crucifixion, and Pilate was banished to Gaul and later committed suicide. When Jerusalem finally fell to Titus in AD 70, her wretched citizens were crucified around her walls until, in the historian's grim language, space was wanting for the crosses and crosses for the bodies. The horrors of the siege of Jerusalem are unparalleled in all of history.